Welcome to Frozen Sick, a Dungeons & Dragons adventure on Roll20. If you're new to dungeon mastering or just new to Roll20, this video will go over the adventure chapter by chapter, giving suggestions on how to run the adventure and how to use Roll20's features. If you've been a dungeon master before but never used Roll20, you can skip ahead to the feature descriptions using the bookmarks in the description of this video. Spoiler alert, this video is intended for dungeon masters and not for players, as it will go over the entirety of the adventure ahead. This video is intended to be watched off and on as you play, giving tips and instructions as the adventure progresses. Let's jump into the game. Something is killing people in Palebank Village, and if the characters don't stop it, they might be next. This is a first-level beginner adventure that'll help introduce your players to D&D. It'll likely take several sessions to finish, with each session typically lasting between 2 and 4 hours. Here's the most important thing to remember. Role-playing games are designed to be fun. So you should always feel free to change any aspects of the adventure to suit the type of game you and your players would enjoy the most. Once you've loaded into a Frozen Sick game, you should be on the How to Start map page. On Roll20, map pages take up the main portion of the screen, and this is where you and your players will move tokens and objects. You can pan around the page by right-clicking and dragging, and you can zoom in or out by using the zoom tool in the top right corner, or while holding Alt or Command and using your scroll wheel. In the bottom half of the screen, there are a number of tokens. Each token represents a character or creature on the map, and can be clicked to select it, and dragged to move. You can also move a selected token by using the arrow keys on your keyboard. When you select a token, 3 bubbles will appear above it. These bubbles are tied to a character's sheet, but we'll explain that a bit later. First, let's take a look at the main text of the adventure. Roll20 has placed all of the adventure text in documents called Handouts. These can be found in the Journal tab on the right side of the screen. Let's show you some functionality inside of a handout. Handouts can contain links, which will open up other handouts or character sheets. You can use these to quickly navigate through adventure content. You can minimize and maximize a handout by double-clicking its header. There's also a Show to Players button, which will pop the handout out on all of your players' screens at once, making it easy to share key information or visual clues. The handout will appear in their Journal tab, meaning they can access it later. Handouts usually hold text, but they can also hold images. At the bottom of your journal, we've included several art handouts which you can share with your players as the adventure progresses. Of course, you'll need other players to run this adventure for. So let's talk about inviting players. If you're using Discord activities, just invite your friends to your voice channel to join. If you're playing on Roll20's website, you can share the join link provided to you outside the game. For Frozen Sick, we've prepared several pre-made character sheets. If this is your first time playing D&D or using Roll20, we suggest you and your players use these pre-made characters. We've gone ahead and placed tokens representing these characters on all later map pages. Before we go any further, let's talk about map pages, since that's where players and their characters will spend most of their time. Map pages, like what you're seeing on this screen, are where you keep maps and can also use to show large illustrations to players. To switch between map pages, click the Map toolbar button at the top of the screen. To move yourself between pages, simply click on one of the page thumbnails in the toolbar. To move players, take the yellow player ribbon and drag it onto a page thumbnail. You and your players can be on separate maps. For now, let's move it onto the second page called GM Tips. As you can see under the page layers description on this page, pages contain 4 layers. Objects like tokens and maps are split among these layers. You can only interact with objects on the layer you currently have selected, and players only have access to the tokens layer. The tokens layer contains objects meant to be moved, like player and enemy tokens. It's where player tokens and GM tokens will interact with each other. The GM layer contains objects only visible to the GM. Your players can't see anything that you place on this layer, and objects on this layer will always appear semi-transparent. The light layer is only available to Roll20 Plus and Pro users. It lets you designate dynamic lighting lines to hide parts of the map in real time. And the fourth and final map layer is where we place maps and other stationary objects that aren't generally meant to be moved. You'll largely be using the token layer. For Frozen Sick, we've pre-populated many maps with tokens, but if you want to add a character to a page, just drag the character's name from the journal to a map and it will create a token automatically. We've also placed room labels and hidden enemy tokens on the GM layer so only you can see them. You can reveal them by going onto the GM layer, right-clicking on the token, and selecting Change Layer. Bring it to the token layer, and your players will be able to see it. Now that we've gone over map pages, let's go back to character sheets. Go back to the page toolbar and jump to the third map page. For this portion, you can also drag the player ribbon to this page in order to show your players this map page as well. For Frozen Sick, we've included 6 pre-made characters, each having both a first level and a second level version. Let's open a character sheet. Try getting your players to open up one of the sheets in the journal too. To open a sheet, simply click the character's name in the journal. You can also right-click on a token on the map and select Character Sheet. Character sheets in D&D look different depending on if it's a player sheet or a non-player sheet. These sheets might look complicated, but we've designed them to be quick and easy to use. Sheets are covered in buttons and linked text that lets you roll virtual dice, which output the results in the chat tab. Try hovering over elements on the character sheet. Anything that turns red is a dice roll button, which will roll the appropriate die with the appropriate modifiers, such as a skill check or an attack roll. These will output the results in the chat tab. By default, D20 rolls will be rolled twice in case you have advantage or disadvantage. If you have neither advantage or disadvantage, use the leftmost result. On player sheets, there are 3 tabs found just under the sheet's header bar, near alignment and experience points. These are the Core tab, the Bio tab, and the Spells tab. We're currently on the Core tab, which contains the parts of your character you'll refer to most often. The Bio tab contains several places for you and your players to enter details about their characters, and the Spells tab is used by spellcasters to represent and manage spells that they know or have prepared. For the DM, there are also non-player character sheets. On those, there's just one tab. This tab contains all of the information needed to run that NPC or monster quickly. As on the player sheet, there are many dice roll buttons here too that will output to chat. By default, NPC sheets will only show the result to the GM, meaning you can hide or reveal the result to your players at your option. Just like with handouts, you can double-click the header to minimize or maximize a character sheet. Let me drag in a player character token to demonstrate some token functions. To do this, simply drag the name of a character onto the map. When you click on a token, as I mentioned earlier, 3 bubbles pop up. By default, the green bubble represents the character's hit points. For player characters, you can track hit points either on their sheets or on their tokens. You can edit either, and it will automatically be reflected on the other. For non-player characters, every token shares a character sheet, so hit points are tracked on the token only. That is, if you've got 3 goblins on a map, all 3 of them use the same goblin NPC character sheet, so you need to keep track of their hit points independently on each token. The blue circle, by default, represents the armor class of the token. As a GM, you can use this to quickly check a character's AC without needing to open a sheet. Now we're ready to jump into the game. Start by opening the handout in your journal called Frozen Sick. Read through this handout, following the navigation links at the bottom to the story overview and adventure summary. Here you'll learn about Urgon Wenth, an explorer that returned home with 2 glass vials, unknowingly exposing himself and his community to a deadly disease called Frigid Woe. A community leader named Elro Aldatar will ask the players for help figuring out what happened. They'll follow the trail to a criminal family before traveling to a distant outpost to find an ancient magic laboratory and brave the defenses and guardians within. The next handout, called Setup and Starting Points, asks you to work with the players to establish why their characters are in the region and whether or not they know each other before the adventure begins. The story will begin with a funeral for the explorer Urgon, so you might suggest that the characters were old friends of his. Most importantly, you and your players should come up with a reason why their characters always stick together. It's hard to play the game if everyone goes their own separate ways, so giving those characters strong ties to each other can keep the adventure moving forward. Now that you've come up with a reason to stick together, you're ready to start. Move on to the Mystery in Palebank Village handout. Once the players are ready to begin, read or paraphrase the starting paragraph to set the scene. Continue along as Elro speaks to the players. He'll ask them for help, believing his village might be in danger. Let the players lead this conversation, and ask him questions, with you ultimately deciding what Elro says. The player characters have agency and can decline to help, but it's best if they agree to move the adventure forward. Once they've finished discussing with Elro, they'll most likely want to start by either searching Urgon's cabin or Tulgi's cabin. Scroll to the appropriate part of the Mystery in Palebank Village handout to continue. Heads up, the players will soon be rolling dice. For skill checks, have each player look for the skills section on the left side of the core tab of their sheet. To roll a skill, like investigation, simply have them click the investigation skill here. This will roll the check, adding in their skill modifiers and output to chat. You'll notice that, by default, the check will output 2 rolls. That's intentional, in case the player has advantage or disadvantage. If they do have advantage or disadvantage, use the higher or lower result of the 2. If they don't, use the left result. Before we move forward, let's talk about a Roll20 feature called Fog of War, which lets you hide parts of a map from players until you reveal them. For this demonstration, I'm going to move to Urgon's cabin. By default, Fog of War is off for a map. To turn it on, click the Fog of War tool in the left side toolbar. Then select Turn On and Fill Page. This will add a black layer to the entire map, which you as the GM can see through, but players cannot. Click the Subtract tool and make a selection on the map. This will reveal that area. You can continue subtracting areas as the players explore, revealing things as you please. First, I'll describe what happens in Urgon's cabin. If the players go to Tulgi's cabin instead, skip forward in this video to the next section. Once the players choose this path, move the player ribbon in the page toolbar to the Urgon's cabin page. For Frozen Sick, we've pre-placed tokens representing the pre-made characters. If your party isn't using all of the tokens, simply select the unused tokens with the Select tool, and right-click and select Delete. Or just use the Delete key on your keyboard. This will only remove the token. It won't remove the character sheet from the journal, and you can always bring the token back by dragging in the character from the journal like this. If you're using Fog of War, subtract a section outside of the cabin for players to see. First, the players meet Mila, a scout standing guard outside, who will let the players enter the cabin. Once inside, the characters can explore and look for clues. Read aloud the description text, then describe what the players find as they explore the room. As they explore, they might find a folded receipt in the bookshelf pointing them to a shop called Pelc's Curiosities. If they do, you can skip to the Pelc's Curiosities section in this video. Once the players visit Tulgi's cabin, move the player ribbon in the page toolbar to the Tulgi's cabin map page. Just like in Urgon's cabin, we've pre-placed tokens representing the pre-made characters. If your party isn't using all of the tokens, simply select the unused tokens, right-click, and click Delete, or just use the Delete key on your keyboard. You can always drag the character back in, as described in the Urgon's cabin section. If you're using Fog of War, subtract a section outside the cabin for players to see. The players find Tulgi's cabin closed and shuttered, and getting Tulgi to open the door will be difficult, requiring a deception, intimidation, or persuasion check to get her to open the door. See the rolling dice section earlier on the video if you need a refresh on how to accomplish this on the character sheet. Your players may decide to break their way into the cabin. If they do, Tulgi and her pet wolves will attack the players. If this happens, check out the combat chapter later in this video. If the players convince Tulgi to talk, she'll explain that she stole Urgon's finds from Pelc's Curiosities and gave them to Hulil Lutan, a relative. The players will either learn about Croaker's Cave or Pelc's Curiosities from this adventure. If either of those locations is the player's next destination, move to that section in this video. From this interaction, the players will either learn about Croaker's Cave or Pelc's Curiosities. If either of those locations is the player's next destination, move to that section in this video. Once the players choose to visit Pelc's Curiosities, move the player ribbon in the page toolbar to the Pelc's Curiosities map. As they approach, check the PC's Passive Wisdom Perception. This is found underneath the Skills section on their character sheet. If any character has a passive perception of 11 or higher, they hear whispered voices inside. As described in the Pelc's Curiosities section of the Mystery and Palebank Village handout, there are bandits waiting inside. The players can attempt to sneak in to surprise the bandits, or just walk in. Either way, as soon as the bandits notice the characters, combat begins. We've placed the bandits on the GM layer, so you can reveal them when appropriate. Running combat in Roll20 is easy. First, on the left-hand sidebar, locate the turn tracker and open it. This will open up for players as well. Open up the NPC's character sheet for each type of enemy. You can Alt-double-click on their sheet to quickly open it or find in the journal. Each type of NPC shares a sheet, so all bandits that the Dungeon Master controls will use the same bandit sheet. In turn, for each NPC, select their token, then click their name in the NPC character sheet. This will roll initiative for the token and add it to the turn tracker. Do this for each bandit. Get the players to roll initiative by clicking the initiative button in the top center of their sheet. Once everyone is rolled, you can click the sort button to sort the combatants in initiative order. In initiative order, each character gets to take their actions. As combatants take turns, click the next turn button to move the turn tracker. You can click on a token in the turn tracker to remove it when the character is defeated. Once combat is complete, they might question one of the bandits. You can portray that bandit and roleplay the scenario, answering their questions as the bandit, or you can simply explain to the players what information the bandit shared. Otherwise, you can decide that one of the bandits carries orders that point to Croaker Cave. The important thing is not to stump your players. If they've got nowhere to go, the action fails fast and the game will stumble to a halt. Deciding that a bandit carries written orders that the players find after combat is an example of moving the game forward if they don't think to capture and question one of them. By now, the players should have clues leading them to Croaker Cave. Croaker Cave is named for the resident giant ice frogs inside. Huli Lutan and the Udalot bandits she commands have domesticated these frogs to serve as guard animals. The cave is dark, since the inhabitants have dark vision. Some player characters might have dark vision, but at least one of the others will need to carry a torch or lantern to light the way. Before bringing the players to the Croaker Cave map, you should also give it a once-over yourself. The map starts inside the cave almost immediately in combat, but the players will likely want to approach the cave cautiously. Start by describing the outside of the cave before moving the players here. Only once they decide to enter and approach the first entrance pool should you bring them to the map. Since there's not enough space for everyone's tokens to stand, we've collected the pre-made character tokens in the first 2 rows, but you should sort them according to the order in which the players decide their characters enter the cave. It can be useful to have the players imagine a series of squares north of the map and place their tokens along the edge. As described earlier in this video, you can use Fog of War to reveal only areas that the players can see. You can turn on Fog of War from the Fog of War tool in the left toolbar. There are 2 giant frogs hiding inside the pool. Have the frogs make dexterity stealth checks at this time by opening their character sheets and clicking the stealth text beside skills. If a frog rolls lower than a character's passive perception score, that character spots the hiding frog. They can attempt a DC 15 Wisdom Animal Handling check as an action to convince a frog not to attack. Read through the rest of C1 in the Croaker Cave handout to determine what else might happen in this encounter. If the players go south to C2, the scene depends on whether or not the bandits heard combat in C1. Read the text to describe the scene differently if they haven't been alerted. If the players decide their characters go east to C3 and the characters have a light source deployed, a hidden bat swarm attacks. In C5, Old Croaker, a giant toad, is hiding in the water at this time. It's been trained to ferry the bandits across, so if the players can convince it to be calm, it'll also ferry them across the pool one at a time. When you enter C6, carefully read the description in the Croaker Cave handout. Halil the Tan and her apprentice are sitting here praying to Tiamat. If the characters manage to start a dialogue with her, read through the points listed in the description block under what Halil knows. She knows she has a disease called frigid woe, though doesn't know the details about it. She sold one of the vials to a human merchant named Urgon, staying at the Jolly Dwarf Inn in Palebank village. Ultimately, the players should learn that the blue glass vials are the source of the strange malady, and that Urgon has one of the vials. In the event that the characters don't learn this, you can have the chest in the room also contain a journal or notes that provide the information they need and point them towards the Jolly Dwarf Inn. Note that there's a chance that if one of the players opens the chest in the room themselves, they might become infected with frigid woe. The players should ultimately be led to the Jolly Dwarf Inn and learn that the family staying there has each touched the glass vial. They gain the cracked vial from them and can report back to Elro Aldatar. The next morning, he comes to the party with the somber news that the whole family has contracted frigid woe. He asks the party to go to Eiselcross and retrace Urgon's path to hopefully find the cure. At this point, before traveling to Eiselcross, the players advance to second level. For Frozen Sick, we've included second level versions of the pre-made character sheets. At this point, you can instruct the players to use those tokens and sheets instead. For future maps, we've pre-placed tokens for those second level characters. When the characters are ready to leave for Eiselcross, Elro tells them that he's arranged passage for the characters on the ship. They'll be taken to an outpost called Syrinlya. Once there, they should talk to a dwarf named Orvo Mustave, who can tell them where to go next. Once the characters have found the cure, they should use what they need for themselves, then give the rest to an elf in Syrinlya who goes by the name The Buyer, who can teleport the cure to Elro and Palebank village. The islands are covered in ice and snow, well below freezing. The pre-made characters already have cold weather gear that will protect them from the cold. At this point, the characters are in a race against time to cure Urgon and his family. The section, NPCs Infected with Frozen Woe, will describe how long the NPCs have. The ship takes 9 days to get to Syrinlya. It's up to you if the trip is uneventful or if you'd like to invent interesting NPCs or random encounters. To facilitate this, we've included a ship map to use called the Remorhaz. To populate the Remorhaz map with encounters, you can use creatures found in your journal. These journal creatures are pre-built with stats and tokens, like in the adventure. To use them, just drag them into the map. Once the ship reaches Syrinlya, the PCs are led to a yurt where they can rest. Ask the characters where they'd like to go first. If they go to the Buyer's hut, they meet the eponymous Buyer, a high elf mage and their familiar fairy dragon. They confirm that they can teleport the cure for frigid woe to Palebank village, and offers to purchase any Aeorian relics the characters want to sell. Once they go to Orvo Mustave's, they meet Orvo, a soft-spoken mountain dwarf. He is genuinely interested in the characters' lives and asks them lots of questions. Give the players an opportunity to make up some backstory for their characters, or just skim through to Orvo's story. He tells the characters the location of Salsvault, where they found the blue vials. Once they've spoken with Orvo, they can make more preparations for travel and head on their way. They must travel 200 miles over ice and snow. Use the travel speeds chart in the handout to determine how far the party can travel in one day. Keep track of how long they've been traveling, as if any of the PCs has been infected with frozen woe, they might be feeling those effects. As the characters travel, you can choose to generate random encounters by dropping in NPCs from the journal. We've provided a blank snow map for this purpose. Once the characters travel 200 miles, each day they can make survival checks to try and find signs of Salsvault, though this could take them several days. Salsvault is a full dungeon that the players can explore. Look through Salsvault features to see which features are common to the ancient lab. As the players explore, let them decide where they'd like to go, and follow the instructions in each room. Eventually, the players will find the antidote to frigid woe and can bring it back to the buyer to teleport to Palebank Village. The elf pays out the 200 gold piece reward on behalf of Elro. And that is the end of Frozen Sick. Now that you know the fundamentals of running a campaign on Roll20, we highly recommend purchasing the Dungeons & Dragons Player's Handbook, Dungeon Master's Guide, and Monster Manual. With those, you can advance your players to 3rd level and continue the adventure, or start a new adventure with many of our other products like Vecna, Eve of Ruin, or Curse of Strahd. Thanks for watching. Happy gaming!